stare into the silence, looking for some eyes, talking to some strangers to tell them ifs and whys. I don't want any redemption, I don't need you hypnotized. What I want is some attention for a talent unrecognized.
Hello and welcome to another episode of ERG PowerTalk. I'm your host, Joe Santana. That little song clip is a song by a group called Born 53, titled Talent Unrecognized. And talent unrecognized, as you can probably guess, is something that's really important. Many organizations openly lament their difficulty in finding talent within their companies. Most organizations tackle their search for talent by focusing their investments on this 5% of people that they identify as top talents. But that leaves 95% of the people in this big pile called unrecognized talent. And meanwhile, they're often surrounded by great people that are buried in that unrecognized talent pile. Talent that sometimes in frustration just leaves due to feeling unrecognized and ends up becoming the competitor's superstar. So here's the question: is it possible for these hidden superstars to end their frustration and find some recognition right there in the company where they are right now? And can ERGs help their members make that journey from a talent that's unrecognized to a recognized superstar? That's what we're going to talk about today with our guest. She is a motivational speaker. She's a coach. She's an author. She's written personal and professional development articles for national and regional magazines. She has several certifications in various career-related areas, and she's currently working on a new book that we're just going to touch on briefly later on in our discussion. Her goal in this book and in her work is to empower people to embrace their self-worth no matter what their current position.
My name is LaPora Lindsey, and I am a career success coach and a professional resume writer, and I am so happy to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. Thank you for joining us this morning, LaPora. So, LaPora, let's just jump into the first question. Tell us about your personal journey that got you from where you started to where you are today. What shaped that courage and that philosophy that you bring to the work that you do?
So there are, Joe, a lot of different things that has brought me to this journey where I am now. Like, I can't necessarily pinpoint one, but if I had to, I would pinpoint the most recent. And the most recent life-changing event for me actually happened 2 years ago. I have alopecia areata, which is an autoimmune deficiency. And part of that is when I have episodes of bald patches that just result on my scalp, and for whatever reason. And this was maybe 2 years ago. I had an episode where I had the bald patches and I was not ready to shave my head. I wanted to wear wigs. And so I did. I wear those wigs and I'm dropping my son off at daycare. And the next thing I know, my wig is just flying off my head and I'm looking around. I'm trying to find it. Like, where did it go? Where did it go? And I find it and it's on this wall hook behind me. And I'm upset because the wall hook should not have been placed that high. Number one, like, it's preschoolers. It should not be the height of my head. But also afterwards, just really thinking about it and wondering why I was even wearing a wig at all. Why was that something that I felt that I needed to do? And after doing some self-exploration, I found out that it was a lot of fear in me, as far as fear of the unspoken thoughts of others, the opinions of others, but also fear within myself. Am I capable of walking around with no hair and being confident? Am I capable? Can I still do my job without hair? Which sounds very silly, but for me, that was something that I felt was an element. And so that was probably that most recent part in my journey that has brought me to this point where, with doing career coaching, a lot of my focus is all about confidence, right? Being able to know that where you are right now, you don't have to be a certain way, but where you are right now, you have the ability to be able to make an impact and to do something great. So that's the most recent.
That's a great story. As you were talking about that fear, it reminded me of something I read recently, where it talked about how years ago, when you read books about people who changed the world, people who did really important things. There's only a few people. And if you peer into their history and in their background a little bit, you realize that they were connected to powerful institutions, or they came from very wealthy families. In other words, they had the ability to make themselves visible. It doesn't mean that those are the only people that were brilliant, or those were the only people that had ability or knowledge. It just means that those were the only people that had the opportunity to let that ability and knowledge shine. And so one of the things that the author points out is that today, given all the technology we have, such as the technology we're using today, the ability to publish blogs or to do different things that people couldn't do in the past, that the one thing that holds people back today from really shining is not the lack of access to resources that used to be true a couple of 100 years ago. It's actually their fear. So that's a really big component of what keeps people from shining. Sometimes they're blocking their own light out of fear. So I love that story because it pinpoints the challenge that we face today. And we're going to talk a little bit about being able to break through that fear later on as we progress through our conversation. When we last spoke, you used this analogy of a house to describe the importance of people within a hierarchy and an organization. You talked about how, like a house, organizations have roofs, they have big open spaces, and then at the very bottom, holding up that house, they have a foundation that no one ever sees. Talk a little bit about that and how you use that analogy to bring home the point about how certain people in the organization who are holding up the house might be invisible.
Right. Absolutely. So it's so important because when you look at a house, I mean, you could see it as, a building, but a house has a purpose, and the purpose is for people to be able to live there, people to be able to cook there, sleep there. So it's very important for every single element to work properly. So you have your windows, you have your doors. But for me, whenever I'm looking at organizations and foundations and really wanting people to understand how valuable they are right where they are, when you look at the foundation, it's important to realize that if you were to just pour cement for a foundation for a house, for the most part, it's not going to work. You're going to need some support there, right? You're going to need to designate where that's going to go, be able to develop that support, but it's also going to have some visibility that's going to be needed throughout that time. So when you look at the foundation, think of that as your boots on the ground, people that you see when you're first coming into the organization, those faces that you see every single day. There's so many of them. And another reason why that is because for the foundation, we don't really think of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to the floor? No, there's really no question there. But at the same time, if there is a crack in the floor, then it becomes an issue. It becomes a problem. And then when you look at the roof, a lot of times people are saying, oh, wow, look at this roof. Oh, it's so pretty. Look at the shingles and whatnot. And you can see it on the outside. You can see it on the inside. You can see it from far away. You can see it from nearby. And it's very similar to an organizational structure where you could look at the CEO or a supervisor, depending on that structure there, where they could be representative of that roof. And then you have the other individuals, that the other part of that team that is representative of those positions, where we may see it, but we may not necessarily give it all the attention that it deserves. But again, being able to have that support there, that connection is so very important. And also that visibility. And when it comes to organizations, we're talking about opportunities, we're talking about volunteering, we're talking about recognition, we're talking about appreciation, so many things that is going to provide the necessities needed for that foundation to ensure that you have a healthy house. Because as beautiful as a house can be, if that foundation isn't healthy, guess what's going to happen? It's probably going to fall. So just something to kind of keep in mind there.
Yeah, those are great points. I mean, as someone who's bought a house more than once, I know that sometimes a house can appear to be fantastic from the outside. Then you have those engineers who come in and start looking at it more carefully, and they discover all kinds of things that don't show up when you're just looking at shingles and a roof and beautiful windows. So point well taken. And the same thing can be said of organizations, where you can look at an organization and think like, wow, the CEO is a superstar, or this other person is great. That means the organization is fantastic. But there could be weaknesses at that foundational level as a result of neglect or a number of other things that haven't surfaced yet, but that house is now sitting on that shaky ground. So let's go back to the fear that we were talking about. When we first met, we talked about how that fear of discomfort, that fear of failure or looking bad, often blocks people who are buried deep, deep in that organization's foundation from having any visible impact. So tell us what you found produces that fear.
Well, I would say from my own personal experience before I had started my own business, and even with the clients that I see and I've worked with in the past and I worked with currently, so many things. So people, they have these amazing, wonderful skills. You have people who have never stepped out in a manager type role or a leadership type role, but they have those organizational skills. They have those leadership skills. They have the ability to be able to create these amazing plans. But a lot of times they are afraid for several different reasons. They are afraid because they don't want to look foolish. They are afraid due to uncertainty. And then there's also that fear of rejection as well, in regards to when they are stepping forward, then there's the possibility that it won't be accepted. And so when you're taking all of these different things, then you have this big ball of avoidance, essentially is what it boils down to. But if you've done any reading on psychology and how that works, whenever we're anxious about something or whenever we fear something and we suppress it, then all that does is it just keeps everything suppressed, right? But it doesn't eliminate that. It doesn't minimize that fear. And so we have this high level of fears that are suppressed. And with that rejection that people try to avoid and completely suppress, it's because we don't want to be uncomfortable. Like discomfort is not necessarily something that we look for. Like, oh, let me find a way to be uncomfortable at work today as I work to meet my goals. That's not necessarily something that we do. It's really hard to give it a go, give it a try, and know that this doesn't necessarily represent what I'm capable of. But in fact, this is a part of the journey that is going to make me better at what I do.
Fantastic. Well said. So you talk also about the need that people have to develop personal self-awareness in order to get through the difficulty of not only these fears, but also being able to present themselves in a stronger way. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So if you're having those fears and you're needing to present yourself in a way that's going to be beneficial, there are 3 different things that you can do, or 3 different steps. And so that first one is really being able to identify skill or identifying a goal that is able to be achieved. So let's say we can take the company route and you're really wanting to plan like a major event. Like that's you've never planned anything before, but you're really wanting to plan an event, which can bring awareness in regards to potential challenges or issues that are being faced within your company. That's a huge task to take on, especially if you've never done it before. So when I say being able to identify that skill or that goal, being able to break it down into bite-sized pieces. So for you, being able to figure out, so where is my strength with this? Am I more of a event planner? Am I more of a organizational logistics person? Where do my strengths lie? I know I want this event to happen, but where do my strengths lie with being able to make this happen? But then also that next step is being able to educate yourself by being able to find those resources, being able to find a support system. And so some of that is about doing your own research and reading and determining how can I effectively make this happen. It's also about reaching out to others, seeing what strengths are surrounding you within that community. Perhaps someone else can bring something to the table that can help propel that event in a trajectory that you want it to go in. And then that last phase there is being able to implement that plan, putting it into action. And so even though it started off with just one thought, one skill, hey, I really want this to happen, this is what I bring to the table. By going through those other 2 steps, something that started off as one idea, I'm a little nervous about this, but I think I can make this happen, can turn into something amazing. Now, if you want to look at that with another type of analogy, because I love analogies, You can look at it in the sense of saying, look at this gallon of water. I'm going to start drinking a gallon of water every single day. That is huge. If you don't drink water, that is a huge goal. And it's wonderful. And it's wonderful that you set that because you're going to be healthy after accomplishing that. However, that can be very intimidating and that can be very frustrating because from starting from, let's say, half a glass of water a day to a gallon, it's a big change there. So instead, similar to identifying that one goal, that one skill, if you were to say, I am going to drink more water today than I drank yesterday, or I am going to drink 1 cup of water a day, slowly being able to identify those skills. And then that next step, that education step, being able to grow, to nurture it, is being able to find the benefits of what water can do. So that will continue to inspire you. Perhaps find a buddy who is also looking for ways to drink water. That's going to inspire you because now you have someone to go on that journey with. And then eventually you will be able to meet that final destination of drinking 1 gallon of water a day. So it's very important to take the time to go through each of those steps in order to slowly break yourself of those restraints. We're not in a time crunch here when it comes to you bettering yourself. And so it's important to take the time to go through each of those steps, give yourself patience and work through it.
That's excellent. It's actually breaking your goals down into micro steps that you can take, secure, and then go on to the next and build on it. So that's excellent advice. Now, I understand that, like me, you believe that employee resource groups can really support these talents that are hidden deep within the organizational foundation to be more visible and to do a lot of the stuff that you were just talking about right now. So how have you seen that done? How have you seen ERGs help people who are in that foundation, deeply hidden within the organization, blossom and come out and become recognized talents?
Absolutely. So ERGs, really quickly going back to that analogy of the house, and you have that floor foundation, which are the workers who, the teammates who you see them, but they're not quite getting that recognition and appreciation. And because a lot of people don't really fully understand their challenges, they don't fully understand all of the different elements that go into play with that. And that's where the ERGs can really come into play there, because you could think of the ERGs as being the walls, right? They're that support, they're that connector. So being able to connect what those challenges are to the organization, not in a sense of this is only a challenge, but this is a solution and this is a way to be able to get that to the forefront. Now, as far as being able to include all of the different individuals in those ERGs and being able to help them to break out of those restraints, it requires some involvement. So I know one thing for me, as I was a federal employee for a good part of my career, and we had contractors and then we also had federal employees. And so there was almost this inherent divide there. It wasn't intentional, but there was just this divide simply because we had 2 separate supervisors. We had 2 separate processes for completing tasks. Even though we were all working towards the same goal, we had 2 different approaches in order to get there. And so one of the things that was included there was us creating a committee with contractors, with federal employees locally. So that way we could all express what our challenges are, but then be able to find a common ground, something that we all agreed on. So almost like a mission statement, something that we all agreed on could be that goal. So that way, as we worked towards it, this was something that it wasn't, oh, this is a federal employee thing. Oh, no, this is a contractor thing. This is something that even if we had our separate challenges, we were able to agree that this was something that we could work towards together. And I think about, Joe, I know you had someone on your show last season who talked a little bit about the bonding versus the bridging, being able to bridge those different groups. And that's one way to do that, is being able to take the different challenges, but being able to find what is a solution or what is one way that we could approach this where everyone has some type of commitment and everyone has some type of involvement. Additionally, if there are any professional development opportunities, perhaps, again, for this foundation, wanting them to propel and move forward. If the ERG is taking on any particular projects or tasks, perhaps there is someone there who is able to provide a skill or take the lead on that particular project. So that way they have that commitment, they have that involvement, they have that investment there, which sometimes people are afraid, again, of failing or being rejected. And so they may try to back away from that. But if it's in an environment where it's on a volunteer basis, where they know that they have the support, so the probability of failing alone is very little or very minimal, then they would be more willing to step out and try, because they know that they have that safe ground there that they've already developed a community relationship with.
Yeah, great point. And it's interesting. You started to go into what I was queuing up next for you, which is this whole idea of how ERGs can help members get comfortable with their discomfort. It sounds like an oxymoron, but comfortable with their discomfort. And one way, as you mentioned, is through the fact that they're now in a group. They're no longer just doing this by themselves. And so that certainly is a help. And there are other ways as well. If we think a little back about what you said earlier about breaking down your goal into little chunks. Let's say, for example, someone wants to be good at public speaking and they don't feel comfortable public speaking. They can break that down into, what is it? Is it the fear that I'll forget my material? Is it that I feel that I don't have something solid to say that's going to engage an audience? And then they can break it down into little things that they can do within that group that will help them to start exercising their muscle in that area. Maybe they can participate in some kind of a project that involves getting up in front of a room with a group of people and talking about something. And maybe later on, they can be the person that leads that discussion. Maybe later on, they can do the whole thing by themselves without having another group of people there. So again, using that thinking that you were talking about before, breaking it down into components and then leveraging the group. Are there other ways you've seen ERGs help their members to get comfortable with various types of discomfort so they can overcome limiting fears?
I think a big part is you hear a lot about emotional intelligence, and you'll hear a lot about vulnerability. And the reason for that is because not only is it trending, but it's trending because it works. So I don't think it's just a trend. I just think that it's one of those things where it took a while for it to catch on, but it's catching on and it's going ablaze for all the right reasons because it works. It's about being able to have that true connection there. And so for ERGs in a process, right? That true connection, being able to develop that relationship, that is going to be a really key focal point. And I'm not just talking about the hello, how are you doing? Because I've been guilty of that, but the true get to know you type deal. So if there are opportunities for ERGs or BRGs to hold events where it's the sole focus there is to get an understanding of where each person is coming from, that is going to be a really key focal point in understanding and helping those individuals to develop self-awareness, which is that foundational, I guess, pun intended, I don't know, but that foundational step in emotional intelligence is being able to have that self-awareness. And so the more that employee resource groups and business resource groups are able to provide that training, but also provide an opportunity to utilize those skills, the better equipped each individual will be outside of those groups to effectively communicate their needs, their desires, because they've been able to do so in an environment where they have that community belonging. And then when stepping outside of that, then again, it's just that practice continuously doing it. Now you are in a different environment, but the skill almost becomes second nature to where now people are able to effectively communicate what those issues and problems are outside of that place where they are feeling more comfortable with doing so.
Yeah, those are great points. It's an opportunity to model behavior, right? It's an opportunity to practice behavior. It's an opportunity to self-reflect, learn a little bit about yourself in a safe environment. There's an exercise that I like to do, and anybody who's interested in doing this exercise can actually look it up on the internet. It's called an I am from poem. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or used it, LaPora, but
No.
when you have a chance, look it up. So some of the people that are here might have gone through this with me. And I am from poem is basically a really simple exercise where you use a template that starts with, you give it a title, and then it starts with I am from, and you use that phrase I am from maybe 10 different times, and you add other information to it that refers back to your parents, your heritage, your experiences, all the way through various aspects of your life. And the interesting thing about that is that it gives people in the room sometimes an opportunity to get to know themselves and each other at a level that most corporate experiences don't allow. So there are people I've done this exercise with who've known each other for years and working in the same place. And I've done it with ERG and also other types of groups. And they'll say, you know what? I never knew that about this person. I never knew that. And I just realized something about myself as I was going through it. So that's an exercise that, if anyone out there wants to try something with their ERGs along the lines of gaining some personal awareness and awareness of the other people around them, I recommend it. So just Google I am from poem, and the template will come up. There are lots of versions of it. I have my own version, but there are other versions. They're all good. Pull it down, check it out, and see if you can do that in one of your sessions. And I think you'll find it really illuminating. So when we started talking, we also mentioned the fact that you are working on a book. So tell us about your book. Tell us what it's about, what your goal is in this particular effort.
Yes. So my book, I'm very excited about. I actually just finished the book proposal, which is a milestone for me. And so now I'm navigating worlds of literary agents and all that fun stuff, but I'm really excited about it. But my book is a self-help, so nonfiction self-help, or what they're calling now, I guess, prescriptive nonfiction, which I thought was interesting. But essentially what it's about is really about understanding that regardless of your skill level, your knowledge, whatever your current career position is, when it comes to being able to make an effective impact on life, on other people, being positive, making changes, none of that matters. We have this idea as a society, we have this idea as far as, what success looks like and what it is to be valuable. But in all reality, all of that boils down to what our actions are, not our salary, not the likes, not the comments, but it boils down to what we have to offer. And so my book is really an opportunity to voice that, but at the same time, provide encouragement for a lot of people who feel that what they do, those foundational players, what they do, that it doesn't matter, because I can guarantee you it does. And I'm so very passionate about ensuring that everyone knows that regardless of the role you play, your role is absolutely essential and it's absolutely needed and much appreciated. And I just want people to take pride in what they do and to embrace their worth and to embrace their own version of success.
That's wonderful. And I think a timely book for many people today. I think sometimes people do get frustrated in their organizations and in their jobs because they don't feel that sense of what they're doing really matters. They feel more like they're a cog, perhaps, in a bigger wheel, and that they are interchangeable and the part that they play is very small. But to your point, you can be valuable in any position. And in fact, if you are somewhere, you are driving some kind of value into what you're doing. You're part of you're either one of the pretty shingles, or you're one of the beams that's supporting the roof, or you're the foundation that's holding up the whole house, using your analogy. So we all have worth that way. So I'm sure that in putting this book together and in planning it, that you have done a lot of research and that you've looked at a lot of materials that are out there that might be of value to our listeners. So is there anything out there that you would recommend that people go to and look at as they wait for your book to come out, that at least will give them an opportunity to wrap their arms and heads around some of these ideas?
Yes, absolutely. So I would say anything on emotional intelligence, for one, because you can't go wrong with that. Specifically, if they're looking for a specific book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0 by Dr. Jane Greaves and Dr. Bradbury. But also I am currently reading a book called LaPora, the Four Ways to Read People by Emily Allison and Lawrence Allison, which is an amazing book, which is really just about understanding that there are effective ways to communicate with people, regardless of what that situation is. So I definitely recommend that. And then there is also a TEDx Bellevue by, I want to say Mike Robbins, which is really just about understanding that as you are working your way up throughout your life or your career, or working your way to whatever that target goal is, really being also able to focus on what you have to offer now, and don't get sidetracked by that, and don't discount what you have going on right now, even as you are moving forward. So those are the three that I will recommend. I have more, but I don't want to overwhelm, so I'll just stick with those three for now.
I think that's more than enough. I think that's great. So LaPora, how can our listeners reach you personally if they want to learn more about you and your work?
Sure. So I am LaPora Lindsey on all social media platforms. I say all, I don't use them all. Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. LinkedIn will probably be your best bet to reach me, LaPora Lindsey there. And then they could also take the time to visit my website, because they are able to email me from my website, which is simply LaPoraLindsey.com.
Excellent. Well, LaPora, thank you again for joining us today.